Have you ever been hit with a sentence so bizarre, so unbelievable, that you stand there wondering if you've accidentally slipped into some alternate universe where logic doesn't exist anymore? That's exactly what happened to me when my wife looked me in the eye, sighed dramatically, and said, "Let's be honest." I thought finally we were going to get somewhere. Finally, the late nights, the whispers on the phone, the sudden distance, all of it was about to be explained. I braced myself for the truth. What I got instead was her calmly telling me that the pregnancy she'd just revealed wasn't necessarily mine. It was the result of a dream she'd had about me. A dream, like some mystical subconscious conception, had taken place and replaced biology altogether. Now, before you think I'm exaggerating, let me rewind, because you need the full picture of how insane this situation became. For months, things had been off between us. She'd been more secretive, more distant, her phone practically glued to her hand like it was part of her body. Every time I'd ask her what was going on, she'd brush me off with a smile and say, "Don't worry, trust me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think it was just stress, work, life. But then the mood swings started. The mysterious appointments, the excuses that didn't line up. And then, one afternoon, she sat me down at the kitchen table and dropped the bomb. She was pregnant. She didn't say it with joy or excitement. She didn't take my hand or smile through tears like I'd always imagined that moment would be. No, she looked almost nervous, like she was breaking bad news, and in hindsight, that was exactly what it was. My mind was spinning. Pregnant. We hadn't exactly been trying, but we hadn't been stopping it either. Still, something in her tone made my stomach churn. So I asked cautiously, "Is it mine?" That's when she leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "Let's be honest." Those 3 words hit me like a warning siren. They weren't the prelude to a heartfelt confession. They were the setup to the most ridiculous story I've ever heard. She told me she'd had this vivid dream about me, that in the dream, we were together, connected, and she swore it felt so real, it must have crossed into reality. That maybe, just maybe, the baby was tied to that dream. I sat there staring at her, waiting for the punchline, but she was serious, dead serious. She blamed an actual pregnancy on a dream she'd had about me, as though that explained the growing life inside her better than the obvious truth, that she'd been with someone else. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat there, numb, because what do you even say to something like that? I asked her point blank, "Who's the father?" And she doubled down on her nonsense, insisting that she wasn't sure, that dreams had power, that maybe it really was mine after all. That's when the fog lifted. That's when every red flag I'd ignored came rushing back like a tidal wave. The sudden secrecy, the late nights, the times she pushed me away, claiming she was too tired or stressed. The whispered phone calls she took in the other room. She wasn't carrying my child, she was carrying someone else's, and instead of admitting it, she tried to spin some half-baked supernatural excuse that made me feel like I was losing my mind. But here's the thing. When someone feeds you a lie that outrageous, it does more than expose their betrayal. It reveals their arrogance. She didn't just cheat. She thought I was gullible enough to swallow anything she said, even something as ludicrous as dream conception. That cut deeper than the betrayal itself. It wasn't just that she'd been with someone else. It was that she thought so little of me, of my intelligence, that she figured she could rewrite biology and I'd nod along like a fool. I didn't argue right then. I didn't shout or slam my fist on the table. I just went quiet. And in that silence, I decided if she wanted honesty, she was about to get it. Just not in the way she expected. Because I wasn't going to play the fool anymore. I was going to find the truth, every last piece of it. And when I did, there'd be no dreams to hide behind, only reality. So I started watching. I paid attention to her schedule, the names that popped up on her phone, the sudden trips to see friends. I checked the dates, counted back the weeks, and realized something that made my stomach drop even further. The math didn't add up. The window of conception didn't match the times we'd been together. It was impossible for the baby to be mine, dream or no dream. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. There was another man in this story, maybe more than one. The moment I knew for sure came a week later, She slipped up. We were driving, and her phone buzzed with a message. She didn't manage to hide fast enough. I saw the preview. "How are you feeling today, baby mama?" Followed by a string of hearts. It wasn't from me. It wasn't even close. I didn't say anything right away. I let it sink in. I let her keep spinning her dream story while I collected the evidence. Screenshots, dates, messages, and with every piece of proof, the dream excuse became more and more laughable. But here's the twist. Emily, her closest friend, pulled me aside one day. She said, "I don't know how much you know, but you don't deserve to be lied to like this." And then she told me the truth. There was a man from her work, someone she'd been seeing for months. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. It was theirs. Emily had begged her to come clean, but she refused. She'd rather lose her mind creating fantasies than face the consequences of her actions. That was when I snapped out of the fog. Completely. I realized I wasn't dealing with a woman who made a mistake. I was dealing with someone who thought deception was easier than honesty, who thought I'd rather live in a fantasy than confront the truth. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't save the marriage. I couldn't save her. I could only save myself. But how do you walk away from someone who's not only betrayed you, but tried to rewrite reality itself? That's the part I wrestled with. Do I confront her with everything I know? Do I let her family see the evidence? Do I walk away quietly and let her live in her own delusion? That's where part 2 comes in. The confrontation, the fallout, the way her lies finally unraveled under the weight of the truth, and how I turned her absurd dream excuse into the very rope that tied her lies together and pulled the whole thing down. When she doubled down on the dream excuse, I remember staring at her across that kitchen table thinking, this is the moment my marriage officially slipped into the absurd. She sat there, eyes red from fake tears, spinning tales about spiritual connections, and maybe the dream carried over. While I sat in silence, phone buzzing in my pocket, with screenshots that told a very different story. That silence unsettled her more than any shouting ever could. I'd always been the type to push for answers, to press until she cracked, but this time I didn't. I let her talk, and that scared her. The night I finally laid it all out, I didn't even plan it. We were sitting in the living room, the dog at my feet, the TV playing some reality show she wasn't even paying attention to because she was glued to her phone again. I muted the screen and said calmly, "So, how's your coworker handling the pregnancy?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide. For the first time in months, she had no script, just silence. I unlocked my phone, opened the message I'd saved, and slid it across the coffee table. The one with "How are you feeling today, baby mama?" plastered across it, her face drained of color. She reached for it like maybe she could delete it from existence, but I pulled the phone back. "No more dreams," I said, "no more excuses, just the truth." That's when the tears came. Real ones this time. She broke down, sobbing, muttering about mistakes and confusion, and how she didn't know how to tell me. She admitted it was him, the coworker, that they'd been seeing each other for months, that she hadn't planned the pregnancy, but thought maybe she could spin it, keep me in the dark long enough to figure out what she wanted. The anger I expected never came. Instead, I felt this strange, cold relief, the kind that comes when the monster you've been imagining finally steps out of the shadows, and you realize it's not bigger than you, it's just uglier than you thought. But I wasn't done. I asked her why the dream excuse. Why go that far into madness instead of just admitting the truth? And her answer floored me. She said, "Because I thought you'd believe it, because you always wanted to believe in me." That's when I realized it wasn't just betrayal, it was contempt. She didn't just cheat, she thought I was weak enough to swallow anything if she said it with enough conviction. The fallout spread fast. Emily, her friend, backed me up. She told me everything she knew, how she'd begged my wife to stop, how she couldn't stand watching me get gaslit into oblivion. My wife's family, they were torn. Half wanted to protect her, half couldn't believe she'd stoop so low. My own family, my brother, my parents, they were furious, not just at her, but at me, for putting up with it for so long. I had to tell them, again and again, that love makes you blind, and lies make you doubt your own son. When I told her to leave, she begged. She said the baby might still be mine. She clung to that sliver of doubt, that maybe, like it was her last weapon. I told her we'd settle that with a test, not dreams. She crumbled, sobbing, knowing full well what the results would show. The hardest part wasn't watching her pack her things, it was watching her try to kiss me on the way out, as though one last act of intimacy could erase everything. I stepped back, and the look on her face, that shock, that realization that I wasn't under her spell anymore, was the closest thing to justice I've ever felt. In the weeks that followed, the truth spilled out to everyone. The co-worker wanted nothing to do with her once the pregnancy was exposed. He vanished, leaving her to deal with the wreckage alone. Friends who once praised her honesty dropped away when they realized honesty had never been part of her vocabulary. The dream story became a running joke among those who heard it. Immaculate deception, someone called it. Me, I rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but with clarity, I threw myself into work, into the gym, into reconnecting with people I'd neglected while drowning in her lies. I started sleeping better, eating better, breathing easier. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't living inside someone else's script. The DNA test eventually came back. Not mine, no surprise there. She tried to spin it one last time, saying the test must have been wrong, that dreams can't be measured in labs. I laughed, not out of cruelty, but out of freedom, because when someone is that deep in their own delusion, you stop feeling angry, you just feel grateful you got out. So when she said, "Let's be honest," what she really meant was, "Let me lie to you one last time," and I let her. I let her dig her own grave with words so absurd they became my escape. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't always come in the form of another person. Sometimes, it comes in the form of being treated like you're too stupid to know the difference between reality and a dream. And me, I chose reality, even if it hurt, even if it left me standing alone. Because standing alone in truth is always better than standing together in a lie.